Does it work? Does it have proximity effect? I wouldn't know. I'm not listening. Hi, this is Roger in Finland, and today we're taking a look at non-XLR shotgun microphones. So here we have them. And why would you care? Because your camera microphone sucks. Let me say this again. Your camera microphone sucks. Alright, with that out of the way, let's take a look at what microphones we have here today. We have the very popular and very tiny Rode VideoMicro. Then we do have the very versatile and also very popular Deity V-mic D3 Pro. And then the bit conceptually different Zoom SGH-6. The reason why the Zoom is so much different from the other two is that it does require a Zoom recorder to be plugged in, while the other two plugged into anything pretty much. To make it even a little bit more complicated and maybe interesting, I'm going to be using three different recorders: the Zoom H1N, the tiny one, the Zoom F1 that actually got together with the shotgun capsule, and then the Zoom H5. The capsule SGH-6, and I'm going to stop saying that, I'm going to say just the Zoom shotgun, can be plugged into the Zoom F1 or the H5. It's also compatible with the H6 and I believe the F4 and some other recorders. Into the H5, using the XY5 capsule, we can plug 3.5mm microphones in it also, and then the Zoom F1 does have a 3.5mm input also. The nice thing with the Zoom H5, which deserves definitely its own review, is that it can record up to 4 channels. With the Zoom F1, even if it has the capsule entry and then still the 3.5mm jack, it can only record one of the two at a time. What you're hearing right now is the VideoMicro from Rode plugged into the Zoom H1N, then we have the Zoom shotgun capsule plugged into the Zoom F1, and finally the Deity D3 Pro plugged into the Zoom H5 via the input jack of the XY5 capsule. And if you're wondering what this is the Rode NT1. Since I'm sharing my thoughts and my experiences with it, I thought I'm going to tell why am I using these microphones. I have been using them to make videos like this, and I have been using them in some of our short films. And it has been showing me some of their advantages and some of their disadvantages, and well, I thought I'm going to share what I've learned so far. But before jumping into the conclusions and sharing my thoughts, let's take a look at the specs. The Rode has a cardioid pattern, and the Deity D3 Pro and the Zoom capsule have super cardioid. In practice, it means that the Zoom and the D3 will point a little bit more forward, pick definitely more sound from there, and cancel the sound from the sides, while the Rode will be more sensitive from the side. Whether that's something that you want or you don't want, it depends on your use case, but this is definitely a difference in the polar patterns. When it comes to frequency response, the Rode goes from 100 Hz to 20 kHz, the D3 Pro from 20 Hz to 20 kHz, and I could not find information from the Zoom. But if I look at the difference then between the Rode VideoMicro and the D3 Pro, is that one starts at 100 Hz and the other one starts at 20 Hz. This means in practice that the VideoMicro will have much less bass response. This is something you might be looking forward if you're going to be using this microphone mostly outside, or you have a lot of rumble, and that might be traffic rumble or washing machine or whatnot. So in a way you could argue that this is already cancelling those frequencies, but the D3 Pro offers you the ability to actually use those. With the D3 Pro, what you can do is use a high-pass filter, either at 75 or 150 kHz, to get rid of those rumbles, but you have the option of not using those and get all that bass response if that's something that you want and need. When I think of what can the microphone take, it seems that the Rode can take up of 140 dB SPL and the D3 Pro 134 dB SPL. In practice, it means that you can be very, very loud to the microphone and they will be okay. Once again, I could not find precise information on the Zoom. Then when things start to get very, very different, it's about power. The VideoMicro, it doesn't need anything. It works with plug-in power, which means that you just plug it into the camera or into the recorder in this case, and it just works. You don't need anything else. The D3 Pro requires battery, but it does have a built-in battery. It's rechargeable via USB, but it lasts a very long time. 70 hours in standby and 50 hours of usage, which is way more than your camera batteries will last anyway. Just need to remember to plug it in. One nice thing is that because it's a USB-C, you can actually use it plugged into a power bank. So even if you run out of battery, using a power bank, you can get around with it. Because the Zoom shotgun microphone is meant to be used with the recorders, it means that I cannot really compare that. You cannot use it without the F1 or the H5 or one of those recorders. On its own, it's pointless and it's useless, but using it with the recorders, it brings some other advantages as well. But that's the reason why it's a bit difficult to compare the Zoom against the other ones. I have a similar comparison problem with the connections. The VideoMicro works with a 3.5mm jack, a standard one. The D3 Pro uses the TRRS 3.5mm because it has a smart functionality. This means that once you plug it into a different device, the microphone will know what it is and act accordingly. Point being, it can be plugged into a cell phone, which will accept the TRRS, or into the AR camera, which will work with TRS. The microphone will know what to do. Once again, the zoom is a totally different beast for this comparison. If you put it into the F1, you do get a shock mount. If you put it into the H5, you don't, but then you get 2 more channels to record. So that depends a lot. If I compare the VideoMicro and the Deity, then the VideoMicro comes with a right coat mount, it comes with a cable and a dead cat. So it means that out of the box, it's ready for you to be used outside. The Deity comes in a very nice box, the cable, a USB cable to charge it. Then it does have one of these clown noses, but there's no dead cat. These will do okay to stop some of the wind, but not as much as a dead cat would. It comes also with a right coat mount, which is very nice, and actually it can slide back and forth depending on where you want to position the microphone. What I'm really amazed actually is how cheap the VideoMicro is, considering that it comes with the dead cat and it comes with the right coat mount, which both things might cost actually as much as the microphone itself, let alone the pack. Value for money is still one of the best options there are. And even the cheap alternatives cannot go actually much lower than this one. If you look at the Boya microphones, they have something very similar to the VideoMicro, but it's almost the same price also. And finally, going through specs and differences, I would like to talk about the controls. The VideoMicro has none, absolutely. There's nothing. You just plug it and it works. This means that depending on how hot your camera preamp is, it will record hotter sounds or less. In the case, for instance, of the Sony a6400, which has really good and pretty hot preamps, it's easy to dial the sound as you want. In other cameras, might be more challenging. Now that I'm plugging it to the Zoom H1n, I do have the knob control to control the gain, which is practical, but there's nothing you can do on the microphone. The D3 Pro, on the other hand, does have a knob to adjust the gain. The D3 Pro is a clear competitor of the Rode Video Pro Plus, I think it's called, and that one does have a normal or plus 20 dB gain, but I believe that the main competitive advantages of the D3 Pro compared to the Rode alternative is that gain knob. I'm not so worried about the smart connector, because I think that most people will put it on top of a camera anyway, but that gain knob is very, very useful. Additionally, as I mentioned earlier, it has a button for the high pass filter and then changing from 75 to 150 Hz, and that's the same than the power button. Finally, the Zoom, like all the Zoom capsules, does have its own gain knob, which again is very, very useful. Now for this section, I changed the things a little bit. Now I have the Zoom shotgun capsule mounted into the H5. I have the D3 Pro plugged into the F1, and still the VideoMicro is plugged into the H1n. But maybe let's go through some pros and cons that I found, at least in my experience. From the Rode VideoMicro, it's cheap, it's tiny, it comes with a shock mount, it comes with a dead cat, and for that price you really can't beat it. Additionally, if you're going to use it mostly outdoors and you want it anyway, that high pass filter, or reducing the rumble around 80 Hz, it already does it for you, because the response starts at 100 Hz. Maybe that can be seen as an advantage. As a disadvantage, I think it's the one that sounds the least good. It's definitely less directional because of that cardioid polar pattern compared to the super cardioid of the other two microphones. And it has much less bass response, which may matter if you're trying to do things like getting up close and using that proximity effect at your advantage. Does it work? Does it have proximity effect? I wouldn't know. I'm not listening. Getting up close and using that proximity effect at your advantage. Does it work? Does it have proximity effect? I wouldn't know. I'm not listening. Then we have the Deity. The plus is it's definitely fully featured, and whether those features are useful for you or not, take that into account when you check the price tag. It has a built-in high-pass filter, has a built-in battery which lasts a very long time, but as I said before, that gain knob, I think that is where it really, really shines. Plus, the build quality is very, very good, and it sounds good. However, in our experience, especially in the last short film, it's very, very prone to radio interference. I tried to use it mounted on a boom pole and then using the Rode Wireless Go mounted on the camera and the other transmitter mounted close to the microphone, and that caused unbelievably huge amount of interference. We solved that a little bit with having a longer cable from the microphone to the transmitter, but we had some issues. And then finally I plugged it straight into the camera, But in one of the rooms that we showed our last short film, I don't know what was in there. It might have been the very strong Wi-Fi, but there was no way to not get interference. And there were some directions that the audio was totally unusable. This is a sample of what I'm talking about, and you can hear very, very clearly that noise. That's my main complaint with the Deity. I have seen a ton of reviews praising it very, very much, and funnily enough, the only YouTuber that I have seen pointing this issue was Camera Conspiracies. He might not be the most technical guy, but he really did actually find that flaw as well. Then if I think about the zoom, again, a very different beast, works only if you're using zoom recorders like the F1 or the H5, but then in that case it brings the benefits of those recorders. The price is about half of the Deity, but that's not really a good comparison because without the recorders, which add quite a lot more money, they can be used. If you're using it with the F1, then you do get a shock mount and a pretty compact size. Still a little bit too heavy to mount it in a boom pole for my taste, but still manageable. On the Zoom H5 it gets even more complicated. The Zoom H5 is a handheld recorder, but still not a tiny one and not super small. I wouldn't put it in the end of a boom pole either. If it's mounted like this, or if you're gonna just mount it outside of the frame, I think it's gonna do an excellent job. It works great. Plus, you can do it like right now with the Zoom H5. I have this NT1 and the shotgun in separate channels with separate gains. One of the things I like very much from the shotgun mic from Zoom is that gain knob, but that's something that you get in all the different capsules, including this XY5 that comes with the H5. But then the final questions are, which one is for you? As you can see, they are very, very different microphones, comparable because all of them are shotgun microphones, but still they're different in size, they're different in price class. All of them have their advantages, and hopefully today we've gone through enough of them that you can actually make a more informed decision. The next question is, which of them did sound better to you? I did try to change the source of the sound throughout the video. I did put the caption in there as well so you can know about this. And for the sake of comparison, this is how the Rode VideoMicro sounds. This is how the Deity D3 Pro sounds. This is how the Zoom SGH-6, and that's a mouthful, sounds. And finally, comparing it to something totally different, this is how the Rode NT1 large condenser microphone sounds. Alright guys, that's all for today. I hope the video was useful or helpful. If you did like it, please hit like and subscribe, and we'll see you soon for some more content.